Thank you so much for inviting us along on your trip
Thanks
to
for
the
being here.
school. It's good to have you on the programme this evening. First things first, before we get on to talking about why we're here at the school, Lee Anderson, the Conservative MP, has today defected to Reform. What's your reaction to it?
Another day, another story about Tory division. And, I think the bigger picture here is now you've got a government that is so distracted, it's divided, it's arguing amongst itself. Meanwhile, there's no proper governing going on. There are people really struggling. There are schools that need attention. And all we're getting is more and more division within the Tory party. And this is symptomatic now of a government that's really run out of ideas, run out of road, and that's why we need change.
Should he call a by-election?
Well, look, in the end, that's a matter for him, but I think...
Well, it's not really fair on the voters, is it? They voted for a Conservative, now they've got some for Reform.
No, I get that argument. I think if you actually asked across the country people, they would not say, we want a by-election, they'd say, we want a general election. We've just had enough of all of them. This is not just about Lee Anderson. It's about 14 years of failure. I do think there's a profound sense now that so many people say we just need change, we need to move on from this. The Tories have failed. They can see the Labour Party has changed and that we've got a plan to change the country. And I think there's a lot of people that say, look, forget about Lee Anderson, let's have a general election.
OK, well, that's a message loud and clear. We are here at a primary school in Harlow, and we're here because you want to talk about your policy to try and boost the arts in state schools. What's the idea and how are you going to do it?
The idea is to ensure that children, here we're at a primary school, equally for secondary school, get the chance to learn about music, art, theatre, creative thinking, and that it's seen not just as a nice to have if there's a bit of extra time, but actually as a central part of their learning. And so this morning we've been watching children play music, and in that few minutes that we did that, it reaffirmed everything to me that matters, because it's about a love of music or art or drama, but it's much more than that. If you look at the eyes of the children this morning when they're playing music, they're looking up at their teacher, they're learning how to work with each other, they're communicating about what they're doing. These are skills that are more than just about learning music or art. They're the skills that in years to come will be vital for them as they go into whatever job they go into in business or whatever it may be.
Because you, of course, played a lot of music growing up, right?
I did play a lot of music, yes. 4 musical instruments when I was growing up, and went to the Guildhall School of Music as a junior exhibitionist. So for me, that's given me a lifelong love of music. But also it's turned me into an advocate for music and arts and culture, because I can see what pleasure it gives. This morning I asked some of those children, they're only primary school children, how do you feel? And they said, it makes me feel happy. One of them said, it makes me feel calm. So that's the value in its own right. But I think for too long we've felt, firstly, it isn't really important. It is really important, because those skills are going to be hugely important. Lots of businesses say to me, lots of discussions with businesses, what are the skills that you need from young people coming to you? And they say to me, Keir, we can give them the technical skills. What we can't give them is the ability to work in a group, leadership, to speak for themselves. And that's what this gives.
So that's the argument for it. Looking at how you're going to do it, you want to change your curriculum, right? To sort of try and make schools be forced, if you like, to make sure they're offering the arts. But there's no money behind it. And I know reform is important, but also instruments cost money too. I mean, you play the flute. Flutes cost about 80 quid, don't they? How are schools going to afford this with their existing budgets?
Yeah, let me take that in 2 parts, obviously. Firstly, what we want to do is to make sure that music, art, drama are assessed properly. So they're part of the overall assessment. The fact that they're not at the moment means that too many schools don't do it. And therefore children never get the chance. Now that can be changed straight away, and it doesn't cost any money. We do want a wider curriculum review to make sure that children are ready for the work they're actually going to do and for the life they're going to lead.
You say it doesn't cost money. If schools are not offering music now, they don't have the instruments, do they? They don't have the music teachers. So I'm not sure if that's true that it doesn't cost any money.
Well, the curriculum
might not cost much money, but if you want schools to be properly offering music, that does cost money.
No, that's a good challenge. What we're saying is you can change the assessment so that it's counted. That doesn't cost you any money. Drama, for example, again, wouldn't necessarily cost you very much money. Musical instruments, I accept that is going to be some money. And therefore, at this school, I asked them this morning, anticipating this very question. And so they said some parents can afford it, and obviously that helps. The school helps with some of the musical instruments. And then they go to schemes outside the school to help with the funding. Is it a challenge? Yes, it's a challenge. Is that a good enough reason to say we're not even going to offer this to children? No, I don't think it is. We have to work with that.
We're in award season. It was the Oscars last night. When you look at Brits who were successful in the arts, they are still dominated, aren't they, by private school kids?
They are. Christopher Nolan, fantastic win last night. But I think statistically, only 60% of those that are winning awards are from state school, when of course we know that 94% of children, young people go to state school. So there is still that work to do. I think it does matter. I've got no envy for those brilliant people who pick up the awards. That is fantastic, whichever background you have, whatever school you went to. But what that tells me is there's too many people who haven't been given that opportunity if only 60% are coming from state schools. I actually think it goes back to what I was saying about the teaching of it at schools. If you go to private school, you're likely to be getting your music and your drama. And this other thing that I think is very important, which is confident speaking. This happens at private schools, not at state schools, and this matters. So it's not a sort of an envy of those that are winning. I'm very glad to see people winning, but it is to provide a better opportunity for all children to have that chance to be the winner that they could very well be.
I just want to pick up what you're saying on envy there, because some people are listening to you, talking about wealthy people going on to do well at the Oscars, looking at VAT on private schools, will say it is about class envy. I just wonder, is that a problem? Because if you think about it, right, if you're looking at the opportunities that some people have, which are more than the opportunities that others have, who could work really, really hard and never get that opportunity, it's right to feel a bit envious of that, isn't it? It is about envy, but if you want to change, if that's what makes you want to change things, isn't that okay?
I would say opportunity, not envy. It's about making sure that every child has the same chance to be in those awards, the same chance to have their talents nurtured. That isn't about envy. I perfectly well understand the aspiration that so many people have in sending their children to private school, and they may save very hard in order to afford to do so. But I equally believe very deeply that aspiration is there in every single parent sending their children to a state school. I send my children to a state school, our local secondary schools. That aspiration is there. So it's not the emotion of envy, but it is a very deep emotion.
What emotion
saying
is it?
It's about aspiration.
That's not an emotion, though, is it? What emotion is it, do you think?
Well, I think aspiration is actually an emotion. It's about what drives you forward, what takes you to the place. What do you want for your children? What do you want them to have, the opportunities? But it is also about, I suppose, the emotion would be pride in seeing, look, my own children growing up. The pride which they're my pride and joy. Every parent understands that. But here, I went round every single class, so all of the ages at this primary school, and the children were confident. They wanted to engage with me. That tells you something about the school that I think the school should be very, very proud of. But it's about opportunity that allows that pride to come out.
You talk about your sort of pride in your kids. And if I'm being honest, I've always found you slightly impenetrable as a politician, trying to work out what it is that kind of gets you out of bed in the morning, what your vision is, what it is, who is Keir Starmer, if you like. And I read the sort of recent book by your friend Tom Baldwin, and I just wonder, I feel like I got to know you a bit more, to be completely honest, after that. Reading about your mum, who was obviously very ill, but also your relationship with your father as well, who, I don't know if I feel like I'm overstepping slightly, but it didn't feel like he showed you that much love growing up?
Well, this is a difficult one. And what I would say is that you touch on my mum and my dad, and the two go together. My mum was very, very ill, and she needed somebody in her life who was totally committed to her and her health and would put her above everything else. And my dad did that. He would give up everything for my mum, sleeping at the hospital when she was at the hospital, never leaving her side, making sure that he understood the combination of every single drug she might need every day to make sure it could never possibly go wrong, what to happen in certain symptoms. As a result of which, I suppose the emotional space was more squeezed than it might otherwise have been, and therefore, my relationship with him was more distant than it might otherwise have been. That's because he invested it all in my mum. I probably should have addressed that before he passed, and I wish I had, but I didn't. I take it forward with my own children. So I make it a really important part of my life that I'm with my children. I do not want to be that bloke, and it usually is a bloke, who in 10 years says, I wish I'd spent more time with my children. If you want to spend more time with your children, spend more time with your children. So I still take them to their sports clubs. We're very, very strict about Friday nights, staying in as a family. And most importantly of all, when I walk through the front door, the baggage is left there, I'm dad, and I'm their dad, and most of the time that means that they can rib me about anything under the sun. You
talk about sort of pride in people have for their children. How do you think your dad would feel if you do end up in number 10, if you saw it?
He would be proud. He really had difficulty expressing pride, particularly to his children. But as you may have read in the book that Tom Baldwin wrote, after he died, I found this folder of cuttings that he'd kept of all the things I'd ever achieved. He had a book of cuttings which he'd hidden in the back of a cupboard. But he'd cut them out, he'd kept them. I didn't know that. I wish I had known that, so he would be proud, in the way that I'm proud of my own children.
You've been really honest in this interview, and I really appreciate that honesty. So I wonder if there's one more question I could get an honest answer to as well. Last week's budget made it very clear that from next year, we're going to see some really savage cuts to public spending. Really savage cuts. And I feel that you haven't really been honest with the British people yet about what you're going to do about that. Are you going to tax more, borrow more, or you're going to become, the austerity Prime Minister? What are you going to do?
Let's be honest about what we're going to inherit, because I think it starts there. Because what we learned last week was a terrible indictment on 14 years in power. 14 years of Tory government.
Look, I haven't got long, so I just want to know. We know how bad it is. We know how bad it is. I want you to be honest with people. What are you going to do? Are you going to become the austerity Prime Minister if you win the election?
Be an awful inheritance if we're privileged enough to come into power. They've damaged the economy, they've damaged our public services, and we have to change that. I ran a public service, so I don't need anybody to tell me how important it is that our public services are properly supported and properly funded. We have to ensure that we've got an economy that is thriving, because at the bottom of all of this is the fact the economy's been stagnant for 14 years.
I know you want to grow the economy, so but that's not going to happen on day one. I want Sheffield Wednesday to win the Premier League. I know it's not going to happen this season.
But there's a lot of things we can do very quickly. Changing the planning regulations and rules can be done very, very quickly.
Councils are going bust.
National Wealth Fund.
Councils are going bust now.
Yes.
There's a 5.5 year, and I know you'll care about this, there's a 5.5 year average wait from a rape being committed to that person seeing justice. What are you going to do straight away if you're in number 10? Be honest. Are you going to borrow more, or are you going to enact austerity?
Well, where we are going to be able to put money into our public services, we've been clear that we'll do that. So when it comes to the NHS, 2 million reduction in the waiting lists by the scheme that we've got to work 24/7. With our schools,
I'm not talking
getting
about
rid
the initial,
of VAT so that we can put more teachers into our schools,
£1.7 billion.
Desperately needed.
IFS is £20 billion in public services, and you're not being honest about what you're going to do. This is your chance. Tell people.
We need to ensure that the economy is growing. We can turn
it's
that around.
It's not going to happen on day one.
Please, just hear me out
It's
before
not
telling me
it's not.
Planning can be changed very, very quickly. That will have a massive impact on growth. The second thing is our National Wealth Fund, which will bring in private investment. I talk to private investors all of the time, and they say to me, Keir, we've got the money to invest right now in your country, but we're not going to do that because we don't see the stability. We don't see the conditions in which we're going to invest. We intend to turn that around. But I'm not going to shy away from your question. We are going to inherit a really badly damaged economy after 14 years of failure. Our job is to pick it up, stand it back up, and move our country forward. And I'm not going to shy away from that or provide easy answers to that.
Or not any answers.
We've got to grow our economy. Now, you may say that's not an answer you like. I say it's the only answer.
It's a long-term answer, but it's not telling me what you're going to do.
Well, I don't think that it is going to take that long to get our economy going. I think we can turn it around very, very quickly. But what I'm not going to do is make the mistake of saying that, or pretending there are easy answers, unfunded spending commitments are what Liz Truss installed on the country, and we're all paying the price. Last week you saw in that budget, at the very end, staggeringly, the Chancellor announced £46 billion of an unfunded commitment to get rid of national insurance. We're not going to make that mistake because in the end, who pays the price for that? It's working people, and I'm not going to allow that to happen under a Labour government.
OK, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.